Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thanks for joining me this evening for Dharma Sunday, where we take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them with daily life. The title of today's talk is Veganuary, the Buddhist teaching on meat consumption. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So, for most people, this month is known as January, but for an increasingly large number of people around the world, it's known by a different name, Veganuary, which means that people around the world are taking the vow, or the resolution, if you will, for this entire month to abstain from meat and dairy products. Now, one of the big questions in Buddhism that goes all the way back to the Buddha himself is, can and should Buddhists eat meat? So I thought this would be a good opportunity to explore that question firsthand. Now, this is a touchy topic, so I want to make it clear I'm not here to change anyone's mind or tell them what to do. I simply want to give you the teachings as I've found them to be written in the sutras and allow you to make up your mind for yourself. Before we get into that, I'll read this article. It comes from Veganews.com. The title is, "This year, someone new is signing up for Veganuary every 2.5 seconds." And it's written by Nicole Axworthy. So let's get into it. Nicole writes, "Currently, someone new is signing up to take part in Veganuary every 2.5 seconds. Veganuary is an annual campaign that encourages people all over the world to go vegan for the month of January and beyond. As of this week, the campaign has also received its 2 millionth sign-up since it launched in 2014. This means the campaign has nearly quadrupled since January 2021, when more than 582,000 people signed up to take part in Veganuary. Though Veganuary was first born in the United Kingdom, it expanded its efforts to the United States for the first time in 2020, when more than 50,000 Americans pledged to go vegan in January. Veganuary's 2022 campaign was further expanded this year, with India joining the US, UK, Germany, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina as campaign hubs. As more Americans become aware of the incredible influence our food choices have on our day-to-day well-being and the health of our planet, attitudes towards eating vegan are changing." Veganuary US Director Wendy Matthews said in a statement. "And while shifting our diets may seem daunting, signing up to Veganuary makes it much easier, as our free pledge is filled with all of the tools and resources you need to make it fun and easy." More Americans are going vegan for Veganuary and beyond. A recent YouGov survey indicates that 30% of Americans say their perception of plant-based or vegan diet has changed for the better in the last 2 years. Since Veganuary's initial launch in the US, the country now ranks number 2 in terms of campaign signups per country. The Veganuary campaign provides people who pledge to go vegan with tools and resources to help with the transition. Resources include a celebrity e-cookbook, the official Veganuary starter kit, as well as our daily recipes, nutrition trackers, meal plan tips on eating out, and ongoing support through a 31-day email series during their pledge month. The free 2022 Celebrity Cookbook that is sent to all participants includes contributions from Venus Williams, Jane Goodall, Bryan Adams, Mayim Bialik, and NYC Mayor Eric Adams. No matter what your past habits or family traditions might have been, you always have the power to choose to eat healthier, Eric Adams said in a statement. You can incorporate foods that tie into your heritage while reinventing comfort food the way it was always intended, as healing for the mind, body, and soul. Alright, I think I'll stop there in the interest of time, but again, the article comes from vegnews.com, and it's entitled, "This year, someone new is signing up for Veganuary every 2.5 seconds." It was written by Nicole Axworthy. Now, before we get into the question of eat meaning as it applies to Buddhism, I think it's important that I talk about my own journey in trying to answer this question. Now, I grew up eating the standard American diet with one caveat. My family was born and raised in the South. And if you know anything about Southern cooking, you know everything has meat in it. So you have the collard greens, and there's pork fat thrown in there for flavor. You have green beans, but they have bacon on them for some reason. So meat was everywhere when I was growing up, and I really didn't question it. I was a kid, I ate what was in front of me, and even when I grew up, I knew intuitively that a hamburger was a cow, that a pork chop was a pig at some point, but I never really put two and two together where what I was eating was a living animal at some point with a mind of its own. And it kind of stayed that way until I started practicing Buddhism. So when I started practicing, I was at the Indianapolis Zen Center practicing under Pope Link Rhodes. And one of the nice things he would do for us is every Wednesday he would make a vegetarian dinner. So he'd go into the kitchen and he'd do a chef thing, and there'd be a salad and some other treats for us to eat. And we'd all just eat our vegetarian dinner and commune with one another, have some fellowship before we went into the meditation hall for our practice. And he never made a big deal out of it, never said this is what you should be doing. He just made vegetarian food, allowed us to eat it. One day, however, I was running late for practice, and I decided to grab some food along the way, the idea being that I'd run into the kitchen, scarf down whatever I had, and then still get in there in time for meditation without my stomach grumbling. And it just so happened that I got a meal of steak and shrimp, and I think mashed potatoes, if I remember correctly. So I go in there with my steak and shrimp, and I open up my food container, and I'm eating as fast as I can. And one of the senior students walk in, they take a look at what I'm eating, and very politely but very firmly she said, "You can't eat that here." And she was very polite. She explained that in Buddhism, we see all animals as an extension of ourselves, etc., etc. I was very new to training at that point, so I didn't really get it. But I didn't want to be rude. I was in someone else's home, and I also really wanted to practice, so I just took my food on the porch. It was warm, finished my meal, and went back into the meditation hall. And nothing changed right that instant, but that kind of cracked open a door in my mind where I started to think and do research on, well, what is actually on my plate? So I watched some documentaries about cowspiracy and forks over knives, and I learned that some of the issues that I have in my family related to heart disease and diabetes, plant-based diet can be protective against those things. And I should stop there and say I'm not a medical expert, so don't take that as advice. That's simply something I read in my research. I also learned more about the animal agriculture industry and how the animals were treated, and those things gave me some pause. But what really shifted it for me was when I looked at why I was eating. Like, why am I eating hamburgers instead of bean burgers? Why am I eating pork chops instead of lentils? And what it came back to was two reasons. One, habit. I've been doing it since I was a kid. And two, pleasure. I liked the taste. Hamburgers were good. I enjoyed pork chops. But when I weighed that against the suffering that I saw in the animal agriculture industry, it didn't seem right to me from a Buddhist perspective to put my own pleasure and my own enjoyment of animal flesh above the suffering of the animals themselves. So that's when I switched to a plant-based diet. And it's been many years since then. Apparently it agrees with me. The doctor says I'm very healthy. But I do want to make a point that, one, again, I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not telling anyone else what they should do in terms of their own health or their own diet. And two, that none of my teachers wagged their finger at me and told me this is what you need to do or else you're a bad Buddhist. It was a decision I came to on my own, which I feel is important as we talk about this somewhat touchy topic. So that's enough about me. What does Buddhism actually teach about this question? Can we eat meat or not? And the answer is it really varies quite a bit based on tradition and also time and place. If we go back to the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha said that he never lies. However, he does give teachings based on the time, the person, and the context. He talked about this in terms of upaya, or skillful means. So there's a lot of variance based on the school of Buddhism that you're a part of. Now, in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, the question, can we eat meat, isn't really a question. The answer is yes. There are some caveats, however, that we cannot kill the animal ourselves. It cannot be killed within sight of us. It cannot be killed within hearing of us. It cannot be killed specifically for us. If those things are true, then we can eat it. It was also stated that if the animal died of natural causes, or if it was being scavenged down by birds, so roadkill, then again the animal could be eaten. So in the Theravada tradition, it's not the consumption of animal flesh that's the issue, it's how we get it. So it's the killing that's the result of negative karma, not the actual eating of meat. So in the Theravada tradition, like I said, this really isn't a question. The answer is yes. In the Vajrayana tradition, the answer is yes, however, with some caveats. It's seen as karmically evil, but it's also seen as inescapable. The reason for this is that the Vajrayana tradition was born in places like Tibet and Nepal. So this is high mountain region, very cold, very arid climate, very difficult to grow crops. So their food is mostly meat and butter, right? So instead, what you find in the Vajrayana tradition is they eat lots of meat, lots of dairy products, but they engage in very vigorous chanting rituals to cleanse themselves of any negative karma, also to grant the animal they're eating with a happy rebirth in the next life. Famously, Talopa, a Vajrayana Buddhist master, once said, "This animal is lucky to be eaten by me because now we're karmically connected and they'll have a happy rebirth." So that's the Vajrayana. Now, things change quite a bit, however, when we get to the Mahayana Buddhist teachings, because there we find very strong language prohibiting the consumption of meat. This goes back to the teaching of universal Buddhahood. We all, humans, animals, are manifestations of the Dharmakaya, meaning we're all part of the same Buddha body. So if I look upon you, I see my own face. If I look upon an animal, again, I see my own face. So causing harm to other living beings, that is a being with a brain, is no different than causing harm to ourselves. This is why if we look at the Shurangama Sutra, for example, we're told that having a strong meditative practice is not enough. That eating an animal or wearing their flesh binds our karma with theirs. In other words, if you eat animals, you'll become animalistic and it'll be more difficult for you to reach higher levels of meditation. In the Nirvana Sutra, we're told that abstaining from meat is a great virtue, and that we should regard eating animal flesh as eating the flesh of our own child. Very strong language. And then finally, if we look at the Brahmasnet Sutra, the third minor precept states, eating animals cuts off the seed of compassion. So this is all very clear, I think, that if you're in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, you are very strongly encouraged to abstain from the consumption of animals. So much so that one meditative practice, Shojin Ryori, is the practice of cooking food without the use of meat or dairy products. And it's considered an act of very high attainment if one can do this skillfully. Now that said, the Mahayana view is not enforced universally. Buddhist schools in China, Korea, and Vietnam tend to be very strict in their vegetarianism or their veganism. In Japan, not so much. That goes largely back to the Meiji era when the government who was in charge, in an attempt to weaken the Buddhist order, removed the restriction from eating meat. They also forced all monastics to either disrobe or get married. So if you go to Japanese Buddhist temples, it's not necessarily impossible that you'll find someone consuming meat. Now, some plant-based Buddhist teachers who've really made a name for themselves are Reverend Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Zen master, Tara Brach, who's a meditation and mindfulness teacher here in the United States, Venerable Zhong Guan, who is a Buddhist nun in the Korean Buddhist tradition, and Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is a Theravadan Buddhist monk, which is interesting given what I stated earlier. However, from what I've read and heard from Bhikkhu Bodhi, his understanding of the precept is even if you're not killing the animal, buying its flesh causes another animal to get killed. So there's still a karmic link there that we should take into account. So what's the bottom line? Can you be a Buddhist and eat meat? Well, the answer is yes and maybe. Largely, eating meat in Buddhist circles is treated a lot like drinking alcohol. It's considered to be harmful to our practice, but it's not strictly prohibited, meaning that if you go into a Buddhist temple or go onto a retreat, you won't find alcohol being served and you won't find meat being served. However, no one really asks questions about what you do in your personal life. We're strongly encouraged to abstain. However, again, what we do in our personal life is our own issue. Also, allowances are made for times when it's a matter of survival. So if we're in a place or a situation where abstaining from meat consumption simply isn't possible. Now, that said, if you are Buddhist and you do eat meat, we are encouraged to abstain from it for periods of time. So during retreat periods, during Buddhist holidays, Bodhi Day, for example, it's very common for people to abstain from animal products for that day as a sort of meditative and spiritual practice. It's also very common for Buddhists to take part in secular things like a Meatless Monday or Veganuary. So if you're thinking about engaging in this every year, Veganuary, know that you're not just doing it for secular reasons. This is also can be considered part of your Buddhist training as well. So all of this culminates, I think, in the idea that it's a very good idea to abstain from animal products, at least sometimes. However, we can practice Buddhism even if we do not. What's important is that each of us looks at our own reasons for eating meat and determine if it's in keeping with the Buddhist vow to save all sentient beings from suffering, including ourselves. Amitabha. So, that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. I'll just end with a few announcements. So this was Dharma Sunday. We do it every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I just take some topic from the news or pop culture and I speak on it from a Buddhist perspective. On Wednesdays, we do another practice that's a little bit more involved, and that is meditation and sutra study. And that involves a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a Buddhist sutra, followed by a Dharma talk. So, I hope to see you there. Until next time, Amitabha.